Not without you.
Penelope Murray was nobody. Everyone just called her Penny. 23 years old, a deaf hotel maid who'd learned to survive by staying invisible, keeping her head down around men with power, until the night she lip-read an assassination through soundproof glass. And the target was Rowan Doyle, the man who owned the hotel and half of Boston's underworld. 14 minutes. That's all the time she had to decide as her feet carried her toward the lobby. Walk out the front door and disappear into the night. Or walk into that ballroom and warn the most dangerous man in the city. Both choices would destroy her life. Only one might save his. 30 minutes before she read the words that would change everything, Penny was just another shadow in the corridor. She'd been pushing her cart through the VIP corridor when a wall of men rounded the corner. 3 bodyguards in dark suits, earpieces, moving fast. The one in front saw her and didn't slow down. His hand clamped around her arm and yanked her aside. She stumbled into the wall, her cart rattling. "Out of the way," he muttered. Close enough and loud enough that she caught the words, even with 20% hearing and a half-broken aid. 2 housekeepers against the opposite wall weren't even trying to be quiet. "That's Rowan Doyle, the owner. They say he's the most dangerous man in Boston." She looked up. Behind the wall of muscle walked a man who didn't need bodyguards to look lethal. Tall, well over 6 feet. Dark auburn hair cut short, stubble shadowing a granite jaw, a charcoal suit straining across shoulders built for violence, green eyes, sharp, cold, the kind that warned you to stay out. He was already past her when he stopped, turned his head. Those green eyes found hers, and held. 2 seconds. Maybe 3, but the weight of his gaze pressed against her chest like a hand. He wasn't looking through her the way everyone else did. He was looking at her. Then he spoke to the bodyguard without breaking eye contact with Penny. "Don't be rough with her." 3 words, quiet, final. The bodyguard stiffened. Rowan Doyle turned and kept walking, and the corridor swallowed him. That was 30 minutes ago. Penelope Murray wasn't supposed to be on the VIP floor. Rosa from day shift called in sick. Penny needed the overtime. So there she was at 9:40, wiping down the glass wall outside Conference Room C, when she saw it. 2 men sat inside Conference Room C. Soundproof glass between them and her. Even with her hearing aid at full power, she wouldn't catch a syllable. But Penny had been reading lips since she was 8 years old, since the explosion that turned the world into a muffled, underwater hum. She'd lost 80% of her hearing that night, and her father entirely. At a distance, in noise, through glass, her eyes did what her ears couldn't. Her cloth stopped moving. She stared. The man on the left had a thick neck and a cheap suit. His lips moved fast, sloppy, easy to read. "The balcony entrance. 10:15. 2 shooters." The man on the right leaned forward, thinner, sharper. His mouth formed words she'd never forget. "Boss says it's clean. Doyle won't see it coming." Her hand went still against the glass. Doyle. The man from the corridor. She'd worked at the Ashford for 3 months, and tonight was the first time she'd seen him in person. But everyone knew his name. Rowan Doyle owned this hotel. He owned half of Boston, and someone in this room was planning to kill him in 14 minutes. She looked at the clock on the wall. 10:01 p.m. She dropped the cloth and ran. Half sprinting toward the security office, she made it to the stairwell before she froze. Through the window, she could see the security desk below. The thick-necked man from the conference room, the sloppy one, the easy read, was standing right there, talking to the head of hotel security, laughing. The security chief clapped him on the shoulder like an old friend. Penny's mouth went dry. There was no safe door in this building. She turned around and walked the other way, fast, controlled, heart slamming against her ribs. If the security chief was with them, there was no one to call, no one to tell. No one ever listened to the invisible girl. But someone should have listened 15 years ago. One word could have saved her father. Instead, the world stayed silent, and Eamon Murray died in a blast that took most of his daughter's hearing along with his life. She would not become that silence. 10:05 p.m. 10 minutes. She moved fast. Near the ballroom entrance, she grabbed an empty tray from a service cart and walked through the doors like she belonged there. The ballroom hit her like a wave. 400 bodies in tuxedos and silk. Her hearing aid turned the noise into a distorted roar. Music, laughter, glass, all crushed together into something useless. In crowds like this, her ears were worthless. She switched the aid off and trusted her eyes. She scanned lips. Dozens of conversations. Wonderful party. Love the orchestra. The lobster is divine. Her eyes swept the room. Face after face. None of them right. Then her gaze snagged on the east windows and stopped. He was leaning against the marble column, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a whiskey he hadn't touched. His head was tilted toward a silver-haired man beside him, nodding at something, but his eyes weren't listening. They were scanning the room the way hers were, watching mouths, reading exits, cataloguing threats. A man who looked relaxed to everyone else but was coiled tight underneath. She recognized it because she did the same thing every day of her life. She crossed the room. Her heart hammered so loud she swore she could feel it in her damaged ears. When she reached him, she did something no cleaning girl should ever do to the most dangerous man in Boston. She touched his arm. His head turned. Slow. Those green eyes dropped to her hand, then climbed to her face. Recognition flickered. The girl from the corridor. He saw everything. The tremor in her voice she was trying to hide. The fear in her eyes she couldn't control. The way her hand shook slightly on his arm. The temperature between them shifted, cold and electric. "Mr. Doyle?" She tried to sound steady, failed. Her voice cracked on his name. "You need to leave this room. Right now." She glanced at the clock. 7 minutes. "There are 2 men planning to kill you at 10:15, and your head of security might be one of them." He didn't blink. He didn't laugh. Something about the way she said it, no fear, no begging, just fact, made him still. He looked at her hand on his arm, then her eyes, then her lips, not the way men usually looked at a woman's lips. He was reading her the way she read everyone else. "Who are you?" She read his lips. Her aid was still off, the ballroom noise too thick. But his mouth was precise, each word cut clean, no waste. "Penelope Murray, I clean your hotel." Something cracked behind his eyes. She didn't understand it then, why her last name made a man like Rowan Doyle flinch. He took her elbow. Firm, warm, not optional. The contact jolted through her. The second time tonight his touch had rearranged her nervous system. "Come with me, Penelope. Now." Nobody called her that. Everyone said Penny. Small, forgettable, pocket change. From his lips, Penelope sounded like a door opening to a room she didn't know existed. The clock read 10:11, 4 minutes, and Penelope Murray had just grabbed a wolf by the arm and told him someone was sharpening the knife. What she didn't notice, what she wouldn't piece together until it was almost too late, was the older man near the bar who watched them leave. He didn't follow. He didn't panic. He simply lifted his phone, typed 3 words, and slipped it back into his jacket. The message read, "She saw everything." The clock on the far wall read 10:13, when the first impact shattered the champagne fountain. Penny saw the glass explode before her brain processed what was happening. Crystal, water, light refracting in 1,000 directions. Then Rowan's hand clamped around her wrist and the world tilted sideways. He pulled her down, fast, controlled, and covered her body with his. Not gently, not asking. His full weight pressed her into the cold marble floor, one forearm braced beside her head, the other reaching for something at his back. She felt every inch of him, 6'2" of muscle and bone and coiled violence, all of it between her and whatever was tearing the ballroom apart. His face was inches from hers, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold buried in the green of his eyes, close enough to smell him, that scent again. Tobacco and something darker, the same one from the corridor. His lips moved deliberately, each word shaped with careful precision. She read every syllable. "Don't be scared. I'm here. Cover your ears." Her hands stayed flat on the floor. She didn't move, didn't blink, just looked at him, steady, unblinking, something in her gaze that he wasn't expecting, because she couldn't hear the gunfire, she couldn't hear the screaming. The chaos tearing through the room was happening in perfect, terrifying silence. His eyes narrowed just barely as realization clicked into place. She wasn't hearing him. She was reading him. He held her gaze while his hand came up with a gun she hadn't known he was carrying, sleek black metal pulled from the holster at his spine. He fired twice over her shoulder. She felt the recoil through his chest pressed against hers, felt the tension ripple through every muscle. But she didn't hear the shots, only smelled the sharp, acrid bite of gunpowder mixing with his cologne. Her world was silent. His was deafening. And somewhere between those two realities, something locked into place. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't freeze the way most people did when death came calling. She just kept her eyes on his, unblinking, steady, reading the only language that mattered, his lips, his face, the hard line of his jaw that said he would die before he let anyone touch her. Boots pounded across the marble. She felt the vibrations through the floor. Rowan's head turned slightly, still covering her, still shielding her, his gaze tracking something she couldn't see. A man appeared in her peripheral vision, tall, younger than Rowan, dark hair, blood on his sleeve. His mouth moved fast. She caught fragments. "Boss, exit clear. 2 down. We need to move." Rowan didn't answer right away. He was still looking at her. 3 seconds, maybe 4, long enough that the other man shifted his weight, glanced between them, frowned. Something flickered across Rowan's face. Not quite a smile, too sharp for that, but his mouth curved just barely at one corner. Surprise, maybe, or something darker. Something that looked like recognition of a problem he hadn't known he had until 30 seconds ago, when a girl who couldn't hear a damn thing looked at him like he was the only solid thing in a burning room. Then he moved. One hand slid to her waist, firm, no hesitation, and he lifted her off the floor. She was in his arms before her brain caught up, one arm hooked under her knees, the other locked around her ribs. "Put me down!" She started to say it, but his eyes cut to hers and the words died. He was already walking fast through the wreckage of overturned tables and shattered glass, the man with the blood on his sleeve leading the way, another 2 flanking them with guns drawn, a wall of violence moving in perfect sync. She felt Rowan's heartbeat against her shoulder, slower than hers, steadier than it should be, and he wasn't panicking or even rattled. The cold night air hit her face first, then the leather interior of a sleek black car. Rowan set her down on the back seat. He slid in beside her, and the door shut, the car already moving before she could even process where they were going. "Where are you taking me?" She didn't realize her voice was too loud until she saw him glance at her hearing aid. She still hadn't turned it back on after the ballroom. His lips moved slowly, deliberately. "Somewhere safe. Until I figure out who sent those men. Safe. Somewhere that wasn't home. I need to go home. My sister's there. I have to." His expression didn't change, but something in his stillness made her stop talking. "You're not going home. Not tonight. Not until I know what we're dealing with. Am I in danger too?" Her voice wavered. I just work at your hotel." His gaze stayed level, unblinking, and he said, "You became part of it the moment you walked into that ballroom and put yourself between me and a bullet," which is when her brain caught up to what that meant. His lips moved, and she read every word. "You're coming with me. You're under my protection now." The words landed like a verdict. She shook her head, pulse jumping. "I didn't ask for your protection. You saved my life." His jaw tightened, a muscle flexing beneath the sharp line of bone. "That makes you a target. The men who want me dead saw your face. They won't stop until you're gone." Her stomach dropped as she thought of Nora, her 17-year-old sister, the only family she had left since their mother died 2 years ago from heart failure, home alone right now, and her face changed as color drained from her cheeks. "No," her voice cracked. "My sister." Rowan turned his head. For the first time he saw panic in her. Not loud, no screaming, but her shoulders locked and her breathing fractured. He looked at Arthur in the front seat. "Get the address. Send men to bring the girl here. Tell her she's safe." Penny's hands clenched in her lap, knuckles white, her lip trembled. "My sister is all I have." Her thoughts twisted in circles. Should she be scared? Someone in that ballroom must have seen her warning him. Did that make her a target too? Was she actually safer here, or just trading one problem for another, and this man sitting next to her, calm like gunfire, was just background noise? How much could she really trust him? City lights slid past the windows and she turned toward him, and that's when she saw it. Blood soaking through his shirt just above his left shoulder, dark and wet against the white fabric. "You're hurt." He glanced down like he'd forgotten, then back at her with his expression unchanged. Just grazed. Her hand moved before she could stop it, reaching towards the blood spreading across his shoulder, but he caught her wrist. "Don't!" She wanted to push, wanted to demand he let someone look at it, but his grip on her wrist said the conversation was over. He released her wrist slowly, and she understood. His blood, his business, and her eyes kept drifting to his shoulder anyway. The car moved fast and smooth and silent. Penny sat rigid in the leather seat, pulse still racing from the ballroom as the city blurred past the tinted windows, lights, bridges, dark stretches of road she didn't recognize. Rowan sat beside her, close but not touching, not frantic or shaken, but already calculating something she couldn't see. She turned toward him. "Where are we going?" His lips moved slowly and deliberately, so she could read them without effort. "We're going to my home, where you'll be safe." The car dipped downward as concrete swallowed the night, and Penny felt the shift before she saw it, the echo of tires, the colder air telling her they weren't stopping at street level. A massive iron gate came into view, armed men standing guard on both sides. Beyond it, a mansion rose against the night sky, stone and iron and old Boston money. The gate opened and the car drove through. The vehicle descended into an underground garage beneath the house and rolled to a stop. The air smelled different when the door opened. Stone, oil, metal. An elevator waited at the end of the garage, unmarked, guarded, old steel reinforced with newer tech, and Rowan scanned his card and pressed his thumb to the panel before the doors slid shut behind them. The elevator climbed and neither of them spoke. When the doors opened, Penny stepped into a world that didn't belong to hotels or guests or emergency protocols, dark wood and low lighting and thick walls with men stationed at measured distances, watching everything. Rowan turned slightly toward her, close enough now that she felt the heat of him, and his mouth formed the words clearly. "Under my roof. No one touches you." The doors closed behind them, and Penny realized that this wasn't a place people checked out of. The mansion door opened. Penny stepped into dark wood paneling and amber lighting, armed men positioned throughout the entrance hall, 3 near the doorway, 2 more at the staircase. All of them tracked her movement. Rowan didn't look back. "Come with me." The first floor held even more men, faces she didn't recognize, suits stretched across frames built for violence. They watched her walk past. The staircase was wide, dark wood worn smooth at the center. Each step creaked softly. Second floor, a long hallway stretched in both directions with closed doors and dim sconces. Rowan stopped at the third door and pushed it open. Her hearing aid started crackling. Rowan stepped into the doorway and turned to face her. "This room's yours. They're bringing your sister soon." But his voice, every word he spoke, came through the broken device, amplified and distorted, scraping against her eardrums like nails on metal. The device screeched. Her hand flew up and pressed hard against the plastic casing, face twisting as the pain hit. Rowan's posture shifted. "What's wrong?" She pulled the hearing aid out with shaking fingers. The plastic felt warm, cracked along one edge. "I think it's breaking." Her voice came out unsteady, too loud. "I can't use it anymore. Sometimes the sounds come too loud." She looked up at him. "I need to see your lips to understand you." Rowan held out his hand, palm up. She placed the device in his palm and watched him turn it over once, examining the crack. He turned toward the stairs. Arthur! Footsteps echoed up from below. The man from the ballroom appeared at the base of the staircase, blood still on his white sleeve. Arthur. Get a replacement immediately, Rowan said. Better model, the best one. Penny's head dropped forward. You don't have to... Thank you. His gaze returned to her. I think this is what you need most. Silence stretched between them. Penny glanced at the empty room, white linens on the bed, reinforced mesh behind the window glass. She looked back at him, uncertain what to do. Downstairs is crowded. Emergency situation. His mouth moved carefully so she could read every word. You'll be more comfortable up here. If you're hungry, someone in the kitchen can make you something. He turned and walked down the hallway to his own room. Penny stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. She stared at the floor for a few minutes, then stood. The hallway was quiet. She walked slowly, one hand trailing along the wall for balance. A door at the far end stood half open with light spilling across tile. Through the gap she saw him, Rowan, shirtless, back to the door. Blood streaked across his left shoulder blade. He held a white cloth pressed against the wound. He lifted his head. Their eyes met in the mirror. Penny's breath caught. Sorry. She turned and walked away fast, and Rowan watched her retreat in the mirror reflection. The staircase creaked with weight. Arthur appeared with Nora right behind him. Penny crossed the hallway and pulled her sister close. Nora buried her face in Penny's shoulder. Where are we? Nora's voice shook. What's happening? Penny pulled back just enough to see her face. I'll explain everything. Are you okay? Down the hall, Rowan emerged wearing a dark t-shirt. He stopped at the far end and leaned one shoulder against the wall, watching Penny stroke Nora's hair with slow movements. Arthur appeared beside him. Rowan spoke without looking away from the sisters. Find out what happened to Eamon Murray's family after he died. I want to know everything about the girl. Arthur nodded. Penny guided Nora toward the bedroom. As she turned, her eyes found Rowan's across the hallway. She smiled. Small, shy. Thank you. Rowan's expression didn't change, blank, but something shifted behind his eyes. This girl was starting to catch his interest. He glanced at his watch. We're leaving soon. Arthur looked up. Tonight, boss? They could still be out there? 2 cars. Take your best men. His tone left no room for argument. The girl comes with us. We're going to Maeve's. Arthur straightened. Yes, boss. Rowan's gaze stayed on the window. I want Maeve to see her. He paused, still watching the dark street below. The Murray name is buried in this family. I need to know if this girl is as innocent as she looks, or if there's something else. The knock came at midnight. Penny was already sitting up when knuckles hit wood. The guard outside spoke to someone in the hallway. She felt the shift in energy. Whoever had come wasn't asking permission. The door opened. Rowan stood in the frame wearing a black t-shirt, dark jeans and a leather jacket. He looked different. Younger, somehow, less fortress and more man. She noticed the way the jacket fit across his shoulders, noticed things she shouldn't be noticing. He waited 3 seconds before speaking. Downstairs. Now. She pulled on jeans and followed him through hallways that felt colder at night, downstairs built for fortresses, into a room lined with dark wood and leather. He gestured to the chair beside his desk. Too close. Her muscles locked, fight or flight warring inside her, but she sat anyway. He dropped into his own chair and turned to face her, knee almost touching hers, close enough to read every word without straining. His eyes studied her face like he was memorizing the architecture of her lies. Tell me what you saw. Every detail. Who spoke first? Where they stood. Exact words. She forced herself to breathe. 2 men in the VIP corridor. One tall, dark suit, silver cufflinks. The other shorter, blue tie. He waited. The tall one said tonight and the gala, and Doyle is finished. The shorter one said something about the balcony entrance and 10:15. She watched his face. And one of them was talking to your head of security. His posture sharpened slightly. You're certain? I read lips for a living. Her jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. I don't guess. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then set it down. The tall one had a tell. When he said Doyle, his breath changed. Nervous about what comes next. Rowan pulled out his phone, holding it to his ear while keeping his face angled so she could see. Arthur answered. She read his response. The shooter. ID confirmed. His knuckles whitened around the phone. Send me the file. He hung up. Silence stretched between them. Then he leaned back in his chair, his focus shifting, as if seeing something he hadn't noticed before. Your family, where are they? The question caught her off guard. My sister, Nora. She's 17. He didn't pause. Parents? She blinked at him, thrown by how fast he was pushing. Her throat tightened. My father died 12 years ago. There was an explosion. Gas leak at our house. She paused, the memory still sharp after all these years. We were both home. I got hurt. Lost most of my hearing. His attention stayed fixed on her. Gas leak. She nodded. His gaze sharpened. How did it happen? I don't know. The investigators said sometimes these things just happen. Old pipes, faulty connections. She frowned. Why was he asking about this? What did a 12-year-old accident have to do with tonight? He leaned forward slightly. What did your father do for work? He was an accountant. The questions felt wrong, too specific, too careful, like he was looking for something she didn't know she had. Rowan just nodded once, slow and deliberate, then stood. We're leaving. She stayed seated, not ready to follow another order without answers. Where? He moved toward the door without answering. You'll see when we get there. The car ride took 20 minutes. Rowan sat beside her, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers when they turned corners. He stared out the window. She did the same on her side, marking exit routes out of habit. She caught his gaze on her reflection in the glass. The car slowed, turning down a side street. They pulled up outside a pub with a painted sign, the Black Rose in faded gold letters. Dark windows, closed sign in the door. Rowan stepped out and held the door. She climbed onto pavement that smelled like rain and whiskey. He touched her elbow and guided her to a side entrance. He knocked twice. A lock turned. The door opened to reveal a woman, 50s, tall and fit, with a hard-edged expression and masculine style, black sweater, jeans, work boots, thin gold cross at her throat. She looked at Rowan, and something warmed in her face. Then she looked at Penny and went very still. She stepped back without a word, letting them inside. The pub ran deep and narrow. Dark wood bar, crowded tables now empty, chairs stacked. A band's equipment sat silent on the small stage at the back. The air tasted like smoke and beer and history. The woman locked the door behind them. Rowan's hand found the small of Penny's back. He steered her toward a table. She sat. The woman followed and took the seat across from them. His lips formed words. Penny caught most of it. Maeve, this is Penelope Murray. He paused on the last name. Penelope, my Aunt Maeve. Maeve's eyes stayed locked on Penny. Her lips parted like she was seeing a ghost learn to speak. Murray. Maeve repeated it, and even without sound, Penny could see the weight land. The older woman's gaze flicked to Rowan, then back to Penny. Eamon Murray's girl? Penny's stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. Her gaze found Rowan. He was watching her with the same careful stillness from interrogation, but heavier now, older. You knew my father? Her voice came out rough. Maeve didn't answer. She looked at Rowan, and the look between them carried entire conversations Penny couldn't access. Rowan stood. Maeve rose with him. He said something to Penny too fast to catch, then walked toward the back of the pub, with his aunt following. Penny sat alone at the table, watching two people have a conversation about her father 15 feet away in the empty pub. Maeve's hands moved while she talked. Rowan stood with his back against the wall, arms crossed, face giving nothing away. But Penny caught the micro-shifts. His shoulders tensed when Maeve said something sharp. His focus cut to Penny and then away. Maeve asked a question. Rowan answered with 2 words. Maeve's face changed, concern bleeding darker. She glanced at Penny. Back to Rowan. Her mouth moved again and Penny caught fragments. "What are you planning to do with her?" Rowan's response came slower. He looked at Penny across the empty pub, sitting alone, watching them like she knew her life was being decided. His lips formed words Penny could read even at this distance. "She saved my life." Maeve said something else. Penny lost it in the angle, but whatever it was made Rowan's shoulders go rigid. His aunt reached for his arm, squeezing once. Then she spoke again, slower, each word deliberate. Penny couldn't hear it, but she read it perfectly. "Then let her not know." Rowan didn't respond. He just stood there. Maeve squeezed his arm once more, then walked toward the back of the pub. Rowan stayed where he was for 5 more seconds before turning toward Penny. When he reached the table, she was already standing. What was that about? Her hands curled into fists. What did she mean? His face remained unreadable. "We should go." "No." She didn't move. "You knew she'd recognize my name. You knew something I don't." His expression shifted, calculation behind the stillness. "Not here." He reached for her arm. "When we get back." "When we get back what?" The words came out sharper than she intended. Rowan's hand tightened on her elbow, not rough, but firm. "We're leaving, now." She let him guide her toward the exit because sometimes survival meant picking your battles. The door closed behind them. Boston night air hit her face, cold and sharp. Rowan's hand stayed on her arm until they reached the car. Before he opened the door, he looked at her one more time. "Your father worked for my family years ago. That's how I knew the name." He opened the car door before she could respond. She climbed inside because her legs had stopped taking orders. Rowan slid in beside her, and the car pulled away from the curb. Penny stared out the window. Her father had worked for the Doyle family. Rowan had recognized the Murray name immediately. That's why Maeve looked at her like she was seeing a ghost. And Rowan Doyle was still deciding if she was dangerous. The car moved through empty streets, and Penny sat against the door trying to make sense of what she'd just learned. Her father had worked for the Doyle family years ago, before the explosion, before everything changed. Why hadn't her mother ever mentioned it? Not once in all those years after his death, not during the endless nights when Penny asked questions about who he'd been, what he'd done. Her mother had always said, "accountant," like it was the whole story, like there was nothing else worth knowing. But there had been something else. Something her mother never told her. What kind of work had her father done for people like this? She stared at her reflection in the window. The glass showed her face pale and tired, showed Rowan beside her in the back seat, his profile sharp against the passing streetlights. He shifted slightly. She caught him watching her in the glass. Just a glance, quick and assessing, before he looked away. He'd been doing that since they left the pub, checking on her when he thought she wouldn't notice. The car hit a pothole and jerked left. Penny's shoulder bumped the door, then brake lights flooded red ahead of them. The driver's foot slammed down. The car lurched forward and Penny pitched toward the seat in front of her, hands flying up on instinct. Rowan's arm shot across her chest before she could brace herself, his other hand gripping the headrest beside her head. She grabbed his arm without thinking. Her fingers locked around his forearm and held on. The car stopped. "Sorry, boss." The driver's voice came through, distorted. "Car ahead stopped short." Penny's head snapped left, then right, scanning the street outside for movement, for threat, for whatever had caused this. Her breathing came fast and shallow. Rowan's hand moved to cover hers where it gripped his arm. "You're fine." His voice stayed low and steady. Nothing happened. She looked down at their hands, his palm warm against her knuckles, the contact deliberate, grounding. She pulled away fast, warmth climbing her neck. "I'm sorry." He settled back into his seat without answering. The rest of the drive passed in silence. Rowan stared out his window, but his attention wasn't on the passing buildings. She could see it in the way his shoulders stayed tense, the way his fingers tapped once against his knee before going still. Whatever he was thinking about, It wasn't the city. Penny's anxious eyes kept checking the mirrors. The way she'd scanned the street after the sudden stop, looking for danger she'd learned to expect. And somewhere in the back of his mind, beneath the operational planning and threat assessment, one question circled on repeat. Who the hell betrayed me? Someone inside, someone close, and he needed to find them before they tried again. When they reached the house, Penny climbed out before Rowan could move. She walked toward the entrance with her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. He followed a few steps behind. At her door, she stopped and turned. "Good night." He nodded once. She slipped inside before he could say anything back. The hallway stayed quiet. Rowan stood there for 3 more seconds before walking away. Penny found Nora asleep in the next room, curled under blankets that looked too expensive for their lives. She stood in the doorway watching her sister's chest rise and fall in the dim light. What had she gotten them into? Nora should be at school right now. Should be worrying about homework and friends and normal 17-year-old problems. Not sleeping in a stranger's house with armed guards in the hallway. Penny closed the door quietly and went to her own room. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands flat against her thighs to stop them shaking. Morning came with pale light through the curtains. Penny woke to find Nora already dressed and pacing. "There are men with guns everywhere," Nora said. "Actual guns, like we're in a movie." "We're not." Penny pulled on clean clothes someone had left folded on the dresser. "Just stay inside. Don't wander. Don't ask questions." "But, Nora, please." Her sister went quiet. Penny smoothed her hair back and walked toward the door. A guard in the hallway gestured toward the stairs without speaking. She followed the direction because arguing seemed pointless. Halfway down she heard footsteps in the corridor above. Arthur appeared at the top of the stairs holding a small box. He came down and stopped in front of her, holding it out without preamble. Penny looked at the box, then at him. "What is this?" He didn't answer, just kept his hand extended. She took it, opened it. Inside was a hearing aid, new, sleek, modern design with technology she'd only seen in catalogues she couldn't afford, the kind that cost more than 3 months of her salary. She met Arthur's eyes. He was smiling. She smiled back and pulled out the device. Her fingers trembled slightly as she fitted it behind her ear and turned it on. Sound rushed in, clear, crisp, layered. Not the muffled underwater quality her old one had produced, but real sound with texture and depth. The guard's footsteps somewhere down the hall, Arthur's breathing, the distant hum of the house settling around them. Her throat tightened. "Does it work?" Arthur asked. His voice came through perfectly. No distortion, no static. "Yes." Her own voice sounded different through the new device, clearer. "Thank you." Arthur nodded once. "Mr. Doyle is waiting for you. Breakfast." He gestured toward the dining room and disappeared before she could ask anything else. Penny found Rowan at a long table near tall windows. His attention lifted when she entered. "Sit with me." She crossed the room and took the chair beside him. He pushed a plate toward her, toast, eggs, fruit. "You should eat." She picked up a piece of toast because refusing felt pointless. His attention stayed on her through the first bite before speaking again. She smiled and touched the device behind her ear. "You don't have to speak slowly anymore." Her voice came out lighter than she expected. "The hearing aid you got me. It works really well." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Good." He set a sandwich on her plate. "You'll need it today." She looked at him and waited. "You're coming to my office with me." His tone stayed matter-of-fact. "I need you to look at faces. See if you recognize anyone from the ballroom." She swallowed. "Okay." "Your sister stays here. She's safe. Don't worry about her." Penny nodded slowly. "Nora is in the most secure place in Boston." His attention stayed fixed on her. "No one gets through this house without my permission. She's safer here than anywhere else." The certainty in his voice left no room for argument. They left through a back entrance that led to underground parking. The car ride took 15 minutes. Rowan sat beside her, but didn't speak. When they pulled up to a sleek building downtown, he guided her through a private entrance and into an elevator that rose without stopping. The doors opened to a floor buzzing with quiet activity. People in business attire moved between offices. Phones rang, keyboards clicked. Rowan's hand found the small of her back as he steered her down a hallway. His office sat at the far end, glass walls, dark furniture, a view of the city that went on for miles. He closed the door behind them and turned to face her. "I need you to blend in." His voice dropped lower. "Act like staff. Stay in the kitchen area. Bring coffee to offices. Watch faces." She frowned. "You want me to pretend to work here?" "You'll see everyone that way." He stepped closer. "If you spot either man from the ballroom, come find me immediately." Her pulse picked up speed. "What if they recognize me?" "They won't." His gaze held hers. "You were invisible to them then. You still are." The words should have stung. They didn't, because he was right. She'd spent her whole life being invisible. Okay. He studied her for 3 more seconds, then opened the door and gestured her toward the hallway. She moved through the office like she belonged there, just another face delivering drinks, invisible by design. She didn't see either man from the ballroom. But she saw other things, like the 2 women near the copy machine talking with one of them gesturing toward Rowan's office, and Penny was too far to hear them clearly, but she could read their lips easily enough. He looked handsome today. Has anyone ever seen him with a girlfriend? Her face burned, and she moved quickly to the kitchen, where a man sat at a table with his phone pressed to his ear, his face tense. Penny watched his lips tell someone named Baby that there was nothing between him and some other woman, that she was imagining things, that he'd be home soon. She bit back a smile. Then Rowan's office door opened and a man stepped out, older with grey hair and an expensive suit, moving with the confidence of someone who belonged in this building and had history here. He clapped Rowan on the shoulder in a way that spoke of familiarity and concern. Penny was too far to hear them clearly, but she could read every word. "How are you holding up? We were all worried last night. You've got a guardian angel looking out for you." The man glanced toward where Penny stood with the coffee pot. His eyes found her. Rowan turned slightly, following the man's gaze, and his mouth moved with an answer that came smooth and immediate. "Penelope, hospitality team." The older man's eyebrows lifted. "Hospitality? You don't hire just anyone. Is she connected? What's her last name?" Penny felt her throat close up, but Rowan's expression didn't change, and the lie landed clean. "Colton, she's the cousin of one of my drivers." The older man nodded and said something about Colton being a good family. Rowan's focus cut to Penny with a look that was both warning and question. She understood. She set the coffee pot down and walked out before the confusion racing through her mind could show. She kept moving through the hallway, trying to make sense of it. Then she saw him through a glass partition, the older man with grey hair standing near a window with his phone pressed to his ear and his face turned partially away. Penny slowed her steps and pretended to organize supplies on a cart while watching his lips form words that made ice water flood her veins. "Check into the girl. Find out where she's staying. Don't screw this up again." He turned slightly toward Rowan's office and looked directly at the glass. Penny spun away fast, with heat climbing her neck until she knew her face must be burning. When she risked a glance back, he'd pocketed his phone and was walking toward Rowan's office. Penny's hands shook as she pushed the cart down the hallway past offices and conference rooms, her heart slamming against her ribs. She needed to get back to Rowan and tell him what she'd seen. But when she reached his office, the older man was just leaving. He nodded at her and she slipped inside to find Rowan standing at the window finishing a call. He turned when she entered. "What happened?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I checked everyone. Didn't see the men from the ballroom." She should tell him, but something made her pause. His attention held on her for 3 seconds. "You're sure?" Copper taste flooded her mouth. The lie felt sharp on her tongue. "I'm sure." His phone buzzed, and he glanced down and answered it. Penny stood there as he moved back toward the window. When he finished the call and turned back, she didn't give herself time to second guess. "Mr. Doyle." His focus turned to her. Her heart slammed against her ribs, but she kept her voice level. "That man who just left? The one with grey hair?" His posture sharpened slightly. "What about him?" She held his gaze. "How much do you trust him?" Rowan crossed the space between them in 3 strides and stopped close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. His voice came out flat and controlled in a way that made the air feel heavier. "Tell me." Penny's throat tightened. "I saw him on the phone, through the glass partition by the east hallway." She kept her voice steady, even though her hands wanted to shake. "He told someone to check into me, to find out where I'm staying." She paused. "And he said, don't screw this up again." His expression didn't change, but she watched something shift behind his eyes, some calculation happening faster than she could track. He was already moving toward the door, one hand reaching for his phone. "We're leaving." "What?" He turned back with an intensity that made her chest feel tight. "Go out first. Don't draw attention. Take the elevator down to the garage and wait by the 3rd support column on the east side, near my car. Do you understand?" She nodded slowly, her mind racing to catch up. Rowan Doyle was telling her they needed to run. "Penelope," his voice dropped lower. "Move. Now." She turned and walked toward the door on legs that felt steadier than they should. Behind her she heard him speaking into his phone, words too quiet to catch. Penny walked towards the break room where she'd left the coffee cart, retrieved her bag from under the counter, and headed for the elevator without making eye contact with anyone. The doors slid closed, and she was alone with her reflection in the polished steel and the sound of her own breathing that came too fast and too shallow. Her palms grew slick with sweat, and she wiped them against her coat. Could she trust him? Rowan Doyle owned buildings, commanded loyalty, attracted assassins. What did a man like that want with someone like her? But she'd made her choice in that ballroom. The moment she'd warned him instead of running, she'd stepped into his world. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened onto the garage. Concrete and shadows and the smell of oil. Cars parked in neat rows under fluorescent strips that buzzed too high for her hearing aid to catch, but low enough that she sensed the vibration. She spotted Rowan's car near the back. Black, expensive, exactly what someone with his kind of power would drive. The 3rd support column. She moved between vehicles, trying to keep her footsteps quiet, trying not to look like she was hiding, even though that's exactly what she was doing. When she reached the column, she pressed her back against the concrete and waited. That's when she saw them. 2 men standing near a grey sedan about 30 feet away. One of them was Liam, the driver who'd brought them here this morning. He was laughing at something the other man said, completely relaxed, his suit jacket open and his tie loosened. The other man wore casual clothes, dark jeans, a jacket, but Penny looked at his face and her throat closed up, words dying before they could form. It was him. She'd only seen him for a few seconds in the VIP corridor outside the ballroom, his lips moving as he talked about tonight and the balcony entrance, but she'd been reading faces her whole life, and some things you didn't forget. The way he held his shoulders, slightly hunched, the grey at his temples that caught the light, the way his mouth moved when he laughed, lips pulling back to show teeth. One of the men who'd planned it, standing in Rowan's garage, talking to Rowan's driver like they were friends. Cold sweat broke out along Penny's spine, and her vision tunneled, edges going dark until all she could see was that face and those hands and the memory of a gun rising in dim light. Her body went still as stone. Every muscle locked. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there while electricity shot down her spine, screaming warning, danger, run. Footsteps behind her. She jerked like she'd been electrocuted and spun around to find Rowan emerging from the stairwell door. He was scanning the garage, looking for her, and hadn't seen Liam yet. She raised one hand and made a small gesture, "Come here quietly," and his gaze narrowed as he changed direction. He reached the column and positioned himself so his back was to Liam and the other man, his body blocking Penny from their line of sight. "What's wrong?" She couldn't speak. Rowan leaned closer, reading fear on her face like words on a page. "Did someone do something?" His tone went quiet and dangerous. "Did someone touch you?" She shook her head and gestured for him to come even closer. He did. She could feel the heat of him, smell the faint scent of his cologne mixed with something that was just him. She rose up on her toes and brought her mouth close to his ear. "One of the men from the ballroom," she whispered. "He's here, talking to Liam." Rowan went absolutely still. Not the stillness of shock, but the stillness of a predator that had just located prey. When he pulled back, what she saw, there wasn't surprise. It was calculation, strategy, the look of a man who'd just had a suspicion confirmed. He took her wrist in his hand, not rough, but firm enough that she sensed the strength there, the certainty. "Do you trust me?" The question hung between them. Penny looked at his face, the sharp lines, the controlled expression, and realized the answer had been decided the moment she'd walked across that ballroom floor to warn him. "Yes." Something in his expression softened for half a second before the mask came back. Then we walked to the car together. Normal. Like nothing's wrong. "Can you do that?" She nodded, even though her legs trembled. They stepped out from behind the column. Liam glanced up and his face lit with a professional smile. "Mr. Doyle? Heading out?" "Yes." Rowan's voice carried none of the tension Penny could feel vibrating through the hand that still held her wrist. "Drop us at Boylston Street." "Of course, sir." Penny climbed into the back seat on legs that barely held her weight. Rowan slid in beside her, and Liam closed the door with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. The drive through the city stretched endlessly. 6 minutes according to the dashboard clock, but it felt like hours while Penny sat with her hands pressed flat against her thighs to stop them shaking. Rowan stared out the window, his jaw set, his breathing controlled. He didn't look at her, didn't speak, just sat there radiating that cold authority that made people move without being asked. When Liam pulled to the curb on Boylston Street, Rowan was out of the car before it fully stopped. He came around to Penny's side and opened her door, and the look he gave her said, "Hurry," without using words. She climbed out, and he placed one hand on her back, warm through her coat, possessive, guiding. "Thanks, Liam. I'll call when I need you." They walked, fast but not running. Rowan's hand stayed at her back, steering her around pedestrians and through crosswalks and into a side street where the buildings rose tall enough to block the winter sun. After 3 blocks, he turned into an underground parking garage that advertised hourly rentals and daily rates. "Wait here." He left her standing near the entrance while he disappeared into an office with glass walls and fluorescent lights. She saw him through the window talking to someone behind a counter, pulling out his wallet and signing something, taking keys. When he came back out, his expression was unreadable. "This way." He led her deeper into the garage to where a white Toyota Corolla sat under flickering lights. The car was so ordinary it hurt. Nothing like the sleek black vehicle they'd arrived in. Nothing like anything Rowan Doyle should be driving. He unlocked the doors and waited while she slid into the passenger seat. Her fingers fumbled with the seatbelt, and she gave up trying to still them. Rowan got behind the wheel and started the engine. Smaller, quieter, forgettable. "Where are we going?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He pulled out of the parking space and navigated toward the exit. "Somewhere no one can find us." The city blurred past the windows. Penny saw buildings give way to smaller streets, familiar landmarks disappear behind them, Rowan's hands on the wheel, steady and sure. "How long?" she asked. He kept his focus on the road. "However long it takes." Silence settled between them. Penny stared out the window, watching the city fade behind them, her mind still circling back to the garage, to that face she'd recognized, to the grey-haired man who'd asked about her last name. "That man," she said quietly. "The one with grey hair. At your office." Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away from the road. "Who is he?" For 3 seconds he didn't answer. Then his grip on the wheel shifted slightly. "Killian Doyle." His voice came out flat. "My uncle." The drive stretched 90 minutes through highways that bled into smaller roads and eventually into coastal towns where the air smelled like salt. Rowan drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression unreadable. Penny sat beside him in the passenger seat, and tried not to think about Nora waking up alone in that estate. Rowan navigated side streets with the kind of certainty that suggested he'd planned for this. He stopped outside a real estate office with faded lettering and left the engine running. "Wait here." He climbed out and disappeared inside. Penny watched him through the window, her stomach churning with unease. 15 minutes passed before he returned with 2 keys in his hand. When he slid back into the driver's seat, she couldn't hold the question back any longer. "Nora." The words came fast. "What's going to happen to her?" He turned to look at her. "I'll handle it." She opened her mouth to argue. "But you're the one in danger right now." His voice stayed flat, controlled, final. "That's what matters." Her fingers worried her bottom lip between her teeth. "Why did you tell him my name was Colton?" He shifted in his seat, his expression distant and thoughtful. "We'll talk about that later." Rowan pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed. Arthur answered. "This is the last time we talk on this line. I'm out of Boston. Penelope's in danger and Killian might be involved." He paused, his jaw setting. "I'll inform you and Maeve about my location tomorrow. Right now, I need time. I have a plan." "Understood, boss." Rowan's grip tightened on the phone. "If Killian asks, if anyone from the office asks, tell them I'm on a private getaway, out of town for a few days. Double the men at the house. Keep Nora safe. Don't let anyone near her without your approval." His tone sharpened. "And Arthur, if something happens to that girl, I'll hold you personally responsible." "Yes, sir. She won't be touched." Rowan ended the call and held out his hand. "Your phone." Penny reached into her bag and pulled it out. He took it without ceremony, popped the back case, removed the SIM card and snapped it in half. He tossed the pieces out the window. "From this moment, no contact with anyone. Do you understand me, Penelope?" Her hands twisted in her lap. "But Nora..." His voice rose, not shouting but sharp enough to cut. "I said I'll handle it." He leaned closer, his attention locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath come shallow and quick. "You told me you trusted me. I trust you too, right now more than anyone. Do you understand?" She nodded because her throat had tightened around words that wouldn't come. "Good." He pulled his own phone apart with practiced efficiency, snapped his SIM card, discarded it. Then he looked at her. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice trembled. "Why are you making all these plans just to protect me, Mr. Doyle?" He was quiet for 3 seconds. "Right now I'm not just protecting you. I'm protecting myself and everything I've built." He paused. "You're in more danger than Nora. They know about you. They saw your face at the ballroom, but they don't know Nora exists. As long as she stays at the estate with my men, she's safer than you are." The logic settled over her like cold water. She nodded slowly. They drove another 10 minutes through residential streets and stopped at the last house on a dead-end block. Penny stared at it. Small, old, vinyl siding that had seen better years, a sagging front porch with cracked concrete steps. A smile pulled at her lips. "Really? You're going to stay here?" He climbed out of the car. She caught the edge of his mouth lifting. "I haven't always lived in mansions, Penelope. I'm used to every condition." She followed him up the cracked walkway. The man who commanded boardrooms had to shoulder the door open when it stuck. Inside smelled like dust and old carpet. Penny stood in the doorway, looking at peeling wallpaper and furniture covered in sheets. 3 days ago she'd been cleaning rooms at the hotel. 3 days ago Rowan Doyle had been a name on employee memos, a figure glimpsed in hallways. And now she was here, alone with him, cut off from everyone, no phone, no contact, no idea what came next. Dust covers draped over furniture that had seen better decades. The place was worn but clean. Rowan walked through checking windows and testing locks twice, while Penny stood in the doorway trying to picture him actually living here. 3 bedrooms upstairs, 1 bathroom with a chipped tub. Downstairs a kitchen with laminate counters and a living room where the couch sagged in the middle, a half bath tucked under the stairs. She watched his expression and found nothing. He pulled the living room curtains closed with the same controlled efficiency he brought to everything else. "This'll work." He tested the window lock behind the fabric. "Modest, Last place anyone would look for me. Her eyes caught on the dresser by the entrance. Both keys sat there. A second key meant a second location, another place to run if this one burned. Her stomach twisted. What's the other key for? He crossed toward her and stopped close enough that she had to look up. His jaw flexed once before he spoke. Part of the plan. His voice stayed level. Don't worry about it. She opened her mouth, but he was already moving past her to check the front door, then the back, his hands testing each lock with practiced precision. He knew what he was doing. She could see it in how he moved, how his eyes tracked sightlines. But his shoulders carried tension she hadn't seen before. Make yourself comfortable. He headed for the stairs without looking back. I'm going to shower. Penny sat on the couch staring at peeling wallpaper. 10 minutes of that before she gave up and climbed the stairs. The hallway was narrow. She'd just reached the first bedroom when the bathroom door opened. Rowan stepped out wearing only a towel wrapped around his waist. Water beaded across his chest and shoulders. Her breath caught. I'm sorry. Heat crawled up her neck. She spun around. I wasn't. His voice came from behind her, carrying something that sounded like amusement. It's fine, Penelope. She kept her back turned and stared at the hallway wall. Her pulse hammered. Behind her, a door opened and closed. The silence that followed felt heavier than what came before. She stood there longer than necessary, face still burning, before walking into the bedroom farthest from his. The bed was small, with a floral comforter from the Reagan administration. She lay down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. He was attractive, and that was just a fact. It didn't mean anything because men like Rowan Doyle didn't notice women like her. Sleep wouldn't come. 30 minutes later, she heard movement downstairs. Voices, low and brief. A door closing. Footsteps. She bolted upright, heart slamming her ribs, and was halfway down the stairs before her brain caught up. Rowan appeared at the bottom with one hand raised. Relax. His hair was still damp and he'd pulled on jeans and a t-shirt. I ordered pizza. He nodded toward the kitchen. Found a landline. Pizza place number was on the fridge. Her breathing slowed. A smile pulled at her mouth. Who doesn't like pizza? They sat at the kitchen counter on mismatched bar stools, with the box open between them. She ate slowly, aware of how small the kitchen was, how close he sat. He picked up his second slice and studied it like it held answers. Why did you do it? The silence broke. Last night at the ballroom. He set the slice down without taking a bite. You could have walked away. She wiped her fingers on a paper napkin and made herself meet his eyes. I couldn't leave knowing someone was going to get hurt. The words came soft. She pressed her lips together to steady herself. If something had happened to you and I'd just walked away. She swallowed what she didn't say. I couldn't have lived with that. He studied her like he was reading a language only he understood. His inhale slowed deliberately. I'm a dangerous man, Penelope. He picked up his water glass but didn't drink. A threat to most people. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Last night you were a target. He set the glass down and leaned back against the counter. His gaze hardened a fraction. And now you're a target too. The words hung there. Because of me. She swallowed. The kitchen felt smaller than before. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he tilted his head. Are you afraid of me? The question came low enough that she almost missed it. She bit her bottom lip, forced herself to look at him, really look, the sharp angles, the controlled stillness he wore like armor, eyes that saw too much. She whispered her answer. Yes. His mouth curved, not quite a smile but close. Her weight shifted even though she wanted to lean away. But I also feel safe with you. Her voice found strength somewhere. Safer than I've felt in a long time. He took her in. The delicate curve of her fingers around the water glass, the contrast between her dark hair and pale skin, those large hazel eyes, the way she bit her lip when nervous. His fingers curled against the counter and then stilled. He looked away toward the window. The moment broke. Silence filled the space between them. Different somehow, heavier, full of things neither would say. The explosion roared through her silence. Fire tore through the air and glass shattered in every direction, and her father's voice called her name one last time before the world turned red. Blood pooled beneath his body, and she tried to scream, but no sound came, and the noise kept getting louder, louder, impossibly loud. Penny had lived in near silence for 15 years. She could only hear 20% of the world on her best days, with the hearing aid turned all the way up. But in the nightmare, every sound crashed against her eardrums like physical blows. The explosion roared, metal screeched. Her father screamed, the ringing wouldn't stop, and something warm trickled from her ears down her neck. She pressed her palms over her ears to make it stop, but the volume only climbed higher. Too loud. Everything was too loud. Her whole head vibrated with sound she couldn't process, and her ears burned, and the blood kept coming, and she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't— Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! 3 in the morning, and Rowan lay awake staring at the ceiling while the house settled around him in the dark. The world he'd been born into had taught him that trust was currency you couldn't afford to spend. He'd watched sons sell out their fathers for money, brothers kill each other for power. Women trade everything they claimed to believe in for a more glamorous life. His father had bled out in his arms in a warehouse 8 years ago, and with his last breath told him to find his own truth and live with honor. Now Rowan had to consider whether the man who'd stood beside him through all of it, the uncle who'd helped him take control of the family, Killian Doyle, had been waiting all this time for the right moment to put a bullet in his back. His mind resisted the thought. His instincts didn't. The scream cut through the silence, and he was moving before conscious thought caught up. 5 strides down the hallway, and he shoved her door open. Penny thrashed in the bed, both palms clamped over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. Her mouth opened in another cry he could hear even through the walls. Her whole body shook. "Penelope, wake up!" He crossed to the bed. "I'm here." She didn't react. He stood in the doorway for 3 seconds, wrestling with what to do. Her hearing aid sat on the nightstand, and without it she lived in near total silence. She couldn't hear him calling her name, couldn't hear anything. He'd have to touch her to wake her, and he hesitated because touching a terrified woman in the middle of a nightmare felt like crossing a line he'd never considered before. But he didn't have another choice. He sat on the edge of the mattress and gripped her shoulders firmly. "Penelope, wake up. It's just a nightmare." Tears streamed down her face and soaked into her t-shirt. She gasped for air like she was drowning. Her palms stayed locked over her ears, even though her whole body trembled with the effort to wake up. He shook her gently. Nothing. Harder. Still nothing. She kept shaking, couldn't catch her breath. He'd been calmer facing armed men in warehouses. But this, he didn't know what the hell he was doing. He thought for a few seconds and then made a fast decision. Rowan scooped her up from the bed and carried her to the bathroom. He set her in the tub and turned on the warm water. It hit her skin and her breathing changed, still rapid but more regular. Her grip loosened slightly and her eyelids flickered. He knelt beside the tub and watched the water rise around her. One hand settled in her hair with a hesitance he'd never felt before. The touch was awkward and uncertain, and nothing like the controlled precision he brought to everything else in his life, but her breathing steadied more. The tub filled with warm water, and she stopped screaming. Her breath came more regularly now. The water climbed higher, and she struggled to open her eyes. His touch slid down to her face, rough palms but gentle. She couldn't remember anyone stroking her face like this, the feeling of being important enough to care for. When her eyes opened fully, his face was right there, close enough to see every detail. He could see the moment awareness returned, see her pupils focus, see the fear drain away and leave something else behind. He shaped words carefully with his mouth so she could read them even through the haze of waking. "I'm here. You're safe, Penelope. It was just a nightmare." The water continued its steady pour into the tub. She couldn't feel the sound, but she felt the warmth, and it relaxed every muscle in her body, pulling the last of the tension away. Slowly, she lowered her palms from her ears. She watched his face with an expression he couldn't quite read. His gaze held concern he hadn't meant to show, and something else. Worry. Tenderness, maybe. His thumb moved against her cheekbone without permission. She watched his mouth form the words, and then looked up at him. sharp blue eyes that saw too much. Something warm spread through her chest. She wasn't sure if it was the hot water or his touch, or the way he was looking at her, but the panic was gone. Her lips trembled when she tried to speak. "I'm sorry." He shook his head twice. "No, don't apologize. You've handled more stress than most people could take." She pulled herself together a little more, and that's when she noticed he wasn't wearing a shirt. Broad shoulders, muscled chest and stomach, the kind of powerful build you'd see on a boxer. Her face went bright red in an instant. This time her hands flew up to cover her eyes as if blocking the view would make the embarrassment disappear. He looked at her. Her pale skin had turned bright red all the way down her neck. He reached into the water to check the temperature. Was it too hot? Was it burning her? Maybe he should take her back to bed, but in his rush he hadn't thought about it. She was only wearing a thin t-shirt, and the water had plastered it to every curve of her body. He realized then why she was embarrassed. He looked away quickly, but he couldn't stop the smile that pulled at his mouth. She sat there with her legs pulled up to her chest, hands covering her eyes, face and neck flushed red. Gently, he touched one palm and pulled it away from her eyes. He needed her to read his lips. "I'll be right outside, Penelope. I'm putting a towel right here." What came out of her mouth surprised even her. "Please don't go." Her voice came out trembling and small. "I don't want to be alone right now." He nodded once. In one smooth motion, he lifted her out of the water. He wrapped a large towel around her body and lifted her again, carrying her back to the bedroom. She was small and slight. The towel engulfed her completely. He set her on the bed and looked at her, wrapped up to her neck in the towel. Then he went to the other room and pulled a t-shirt on. When he came back, she was sitting exactly where he'd left her, wrapped neck to ankles in terry cloth, with only her face visible. He lay down beside her on top of the covers, keeping space between them. He stared at the window while she looked at the ceiling, her face the only part of her showing from inside the towel. "Thank you." Her voice was so quiet, he almost didn't catch it. He turned his head on the pillow and looked at her. There was tenderness in his gaze. Something shifted in his chest that he didn't have words for. He made sure she could see his mouth even in the dim light. "I'm here, Penelope. Sleep now. I won't leave." She held the conflict internally for a moment, and then her eyes drifted closed. Her breathing deepened and slowed until it found the rhythm of actual sleep. And Penelope fell asleep with a feeling she'd never experienced before in her life. Complete safety. For the first time in his life, he wanted to be the reason someone felt that way. Daylight leaked through the gap in the curtains and found Rowan's face. His eyes opened slowly. Penelope had curled into him during the night, still wrapped in the towel. One of her hands rested flat on his chest, fingers spread across his shirt. His arm had pulled her close at some point while they slept, wrapped around her shoulders and holding her against him. A slight smile tugged at his mouth despite the surprise settling in his chest. He'd never been the type who wanted to wake up with a woman still in his bed. Love, attachment, emotional connection had never made it onto his list of priorities. Control mattered, yet here he was, wrapped around a young woman he barely knew, completely confused by how little he minded it. The strange part was how good it felt. Peaceful in sleep. So different from the terror that had twisted her features last night. Long lashes rested against smooth skin. Dark hair had fallen across her cheek. She looked like something he'd forgotten existed in his world. His throat moved when he swallowed. His chest tightened around something he couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. An urge to pull her even closer, to hold her tighter, pushed at the edges of his control. Logic slowed. Instinct didn't. He tried to ease his arm out from under her carefully. She stirred and the towel shifted loose. Her bare leg brushed against his, and the contact sent heat through him that had nothing to do with body temperature. His eyebrows lifted. He forced his gaze away from skin he had no business looking at, but the sensation didn't disappear just because he wasn't watching. Breathing became noticeable in the quiet room. He inhaled slowly and pulled his arm back with deliberate care, then shifted his leg away from hers. She woke when he moved. Penelope sat up fast, panic flashing across her face as she tried to make sense of where she was and why Rowan was sitting right there beside her in the bed. Her eyes went wide and confused when she found him so close. Shock registered first, then embarrassment. Rowan sat up too and raised both hands. "Penelope, last night you had a nightmare. A bad one. I couldn't just leave you like that. I fell asleep here." Her expression shifted as she worked through the memory, piecing together fragments from the fog of terror and warm water and his voice telling her she was safe. Understanding dawned slowly. "Oh." She glanced down and seemed to realize for the first time that she was still wrapped in nothing but a towel. Color climbed her neck and spread across her cheeks. "Mr. Doyle, I hope I didn't cause you any trouble." He had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from smiling. The face looking back at him carried so much innocence that his fingers moved before his brain caught up. He reached out and brushed a strand of dark hair away from her face. "No." His hand dropped back to his lap before he could do something stupid. "You didn't cause any trouble. You were terrified last night. When I tried to leave you, asked me to stay. So I stayed." She blinked at him, confusion flickering in her eyes. "I asked you to stay?" He had no idea how to navigate the awkwardness between them. He cleared his throat. "Okay. So." He stood from the bed and put distance between them, stepping back reluctantly because part of him didn't want to move at all. "We don't have phones anymore. Let's head into town, get something to eat. I'll make the calls I need to make from there." Penny watched him with an expression she couldn't quite hide. This man everyone feared. This powerful, dangerous, handsome man standing in her bedroom, looking like he had absolutely no idea how to handle the situation he'd found himself in. She hid the smile that wanted to break free. "Okay, I'll be ready in 10 minutes. Rowan moved toward the door and then stopped. Glanced back at her one more time, wrapped in that towel with her hair falling loose around her shoulders. He couldn't make sense of why he felt like a 15-year-old kid who didn't know what to do with his hands. 10 minutes, he repeated, and left before he could cross back to the bed. They found a small cafe 2 blocks from the main street with checkered tablecloths and a chalkboard menu hanging crooked on the wall. Rowan ordered black coffee and scrambled eggs. Penny's order arrived a few minutes later, strawberry pancakes drowned in whipped cream and ice cream melting into the syrup. He watched her eat. She'd nearly finished the whole thing, and she ate like she meant it while he sipped his coffee and pushed eggs around his plate. His lips curved despite his attempt to keep his expression neutral. She caught him looking, her shoulders lifted in a small shrug. "Pancakes are always my favorite." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm surprised a girl as small as you can finish all of that." Her breath caught and color climbed her neck. She glanced down at her plate and then back at him with that expression he was starting to recognize, the one that said she wasn't used to anyone paying attention. Rowan put his silverware down and met her eyes. He wasn't asking. "You're shy, aren't you? You blush at everything. How did you manage to stay like that, in this world?" Her eyebrows pulled together. "Like what?" He picked up his coffee cup and turned it in his hands without drinking. "Clean. Moral." The word came out quieter than he'd intended. "Good." She set down her fork. "You're a good person too, Mr. Doyle." He turned his head toward the window and stared out at the empty street beyond the glass. "I'm not." "You are." Her voice carried certainty he didn't deserve. "That first day when I saw you at the hotel, your security guard was rude to me. You called him out on it. You care about people. Maybe you don't realize it, but—" He studied her. Those hazel eyes behind long lashes. The innocence that believed in good things. The kind of person who could see something worth believing in. Staring at her long enough might make him start to believe it himself. But he needed to stay grounded. Rowan Doyle had never been a good man, would never be remembered that way, because in a day or two he was going to end someone's life. In his world, survival required killing. His fingers curled against the table and then stilled. "Wait here. Don't move. I'll be back in 10 minutes. He stood and walked out before she could ask questions. 2 blocks down, he found a convenience store selling disposable phones. He bought one, activated it outside, and dialed Arthur's number. "Boss, call me back at this number in 10 minutes. Have Nora with you." Arthur's voice shifted with concern. "Boss, are you handling this alone? Tell me where you are. I'll come." Rowan watched a car pass down the street. "If you come, they'll follow. If they see you there, they'll know I'm coming back." He leaned against the brick wall. "I need one more day to prepare." He ended the call and walked back toward the cafe. When he slid into the seat across from Penny, something shifted in his chest. Her presence calmed something in him that hadn't been calm in years. The phone rang exactly 10 minutes later. He held it out without explanation. She took it, looking confused. Then she recognized the voice, and her whole face changed. She pressed the phone to her ear. "Nora?" Her whole body relaxed. "Are you okay?" She listened for a moment. "Everything's going to be fine. I'll be back soon. I just had to keep us safe." Rowan watched the tension drain from her shoulders. Her eyes softened and the corners of her mouth lifted. Relief flooded her face. When she ended the call, her hand moved on instinct and grabbed his. Her fingers wrapped around his before her brain caught up with what she was doing. Her voice came soft. "Thank you, Mr. Doyle. I needed that. I needed to hear her voice." He stared down at her hand in his, small and pale against his skin. His heart kicked once against his ribs. Something inside him said to tighten his grip and not let go, but he stayed still, caught between wanting and hesitation. She pulled her hand back quickly and color flooded her face. "I'm sorry. I'm not used to people caring." The words hit him harder than they should have. He swallowed hard. Everyone around him thought they mattered, but here sat a beautiful young woman who had no idea she did. Rowan leaned forward across the table, close enough that she had to look at him, close enough that her breathing changed. "Don't wait for other people to make you feel important, Penelope." His voice dropped lower. "You already are." He looked down at his hands on the table. "You need to learn to value yourself." His jaw tightened briefly. Waiting for validation from others just diminishes your own self-respect. He turned his face toward the window, easier than looking at her for what came next. "And you prove every single second that you're more important to me than most of the people in my life." The words hung between them. Her throat moved when she swallowed. He could see it from the corner of his eye, even though he kept his gaze fixed on the street outside. Rowan Doyle, the most dangerous man in the city. The man people avoided unless they had armed guards. He'd just told her she mattered. She bit her lower lip and snuck glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Her heart beat too fast in her chest. Something twisted there. Leaving him when this was over would hurt more than she wanted to admit. Rowan stood and pulled cash from his wallet. "Let's get you some clothes. You don't have anything with you. Then I have things I need to handle." The boutique 2 doors down had mannequins in the window, wearing clothes that looked expensive. Rowan walked in ahead of her. She followed and tried not to touch anything. "Pick a few things quickly. You need clothes. Whatever you need, get it." The saleswoman appeared with the smile people get when they smell money. Rowan pointed toward Penny. "Help the lady. Shoes, a bag, clothes. Everything else, too." He sat down in a leather chair and pulled out the disposable phone. The woman pulled items from racks and started stacking them. The numbers climbed higher and higher. Penny's hands started to shake. Rowan noticed. His posture sharpened, and he stood, crossing to stand beside her. He spoke to the saleswoman. "Box all of it." Penny turned to him. Gratitude and embarrassment mixed on her face. A small smile tried to form but didn't quite make it. He spoke before she could. "No apologies and no thank yous, Penelope. These are necessities." He walked toward the register. She followed a few steps behind. That smile she'd been holding back finally showed as she watched him pull out his wallet. Penny sat on the bed with shopping bags scattered around her and pulled items out one by one. Her fingers found the black lace first, and she picked it up with just her fingertips, holding it for a moment before heat climbed her neck. "Oh." This was nothing like the cotton ones with little hearts that came in packs of 3 from the discount store. She folded it quickly and set it aside with her pulse doing something strange in her throat. The cashmere sweater came next in soft beige that looked expensive, even folded. She ran her hand across the fabric and her breath caught at how soft it felt against her palm. She'd never owned anything like this in her life, never even touched fabric that felt this way. She looked at the pile beside her on the comforter, and her throat moved when she swallowed. Designer jeans that probably cost more than her monthly rent, a silk blouse that caught the light when she moved it, leather boots with perfect stitching. He'd spent thousands of dollars on her in less than an hour, like it meant absolutely nothing. Across town, Rowan moved through the second house with the keys heavy in his pocket. The place was bigger than the first safe house and newer by at least 2 decades. Modern appliances in an open kitchen with granite counters that gleamed under recessed lighting. 3 bedrooms upstairs with fresh paint and carpet that didn't smell like mildew. The kind of place people would expect a man like him to rent when he needed to disappear for a few days. He mounted the first camera above the front door frame and angled it to catch anyone who approached from the street. The second went in the kitchen corner with a clear view of the back entrance. The third he placed in the master bedroom closet facing the window that overlooked the driveway. He pulled out his phone and tested each feed until the images came through clear and sharp. Good angles, no blind spots. His shoulders tightened as he walked the perimeter one more time, checking every window lock and testing the strength of every door. Everything was secure, everything was ready. Tomorrow they'd know where he was, and the thought settled cold in his chest like a stone dropping into dark water. He pulled out the disposable phone and dialed. Maeve answered on the second ring. "Who is this?" The unfamiliar number, the caution in her voice. He could picture her standing in the back office, phone pressed to her ear. "It's me." Silence. She was processing the voice, matching it to someone who shouldn't be calling from an unknown number. "Rowan." Her tone shifted sharp now. "What number is this? Where have you been?" He moved to the window. A car passed below, then another. Normal afternoon traffic that looked harmless. He knew better. "Somewhere nobody knows about." He kept his voice low. "Tomorrow, they'll know where I am." The line went quiet. He heard her breathing change. That slight catch that meant she was working through what he wasn't saying directly, understanding what tomorrow meant. "You have someone in mind?" His fingers curled against the windowsill. The paint felt rough under his grip. "I don't know yet." The words came slower than he'd intended. "But if it reaches him, then I'll know." A sound came through the line like she'd set something down hard. A mug, maybe. Her hand flat against the bar. He could picture it. The way her jaw would tighten, her eyes would narrow. 30 years reading danger in silence. "You're testing him." He stared at the empty street below. "I'm testing everyone." The silence stretched longer this time. He could almost see her standing in the black rose, one hand pressed against the polished wood, deciding whether to trust him or call him on his bullshit. When she spoke again, her voice carried weight he hadn't heard in years. "You're playing with blood, Rowan." He watched shadows lengthen across the pavement as afternoon slid toward evening. "I grew up in it." Something creaked on her end, a bar stool shifting, her weight redistributing like she was settling in for a conversation she didn't want to have. "And the girl?" His jaw flexed before he answered. The muscle tightened under his skin. "She's with me." The anger in her tone dropped away. Left only concern, the kind that came from someone who'd raised him since his mother died. "Rowan?" She took a deliberate breath. "What does she know?" He turned from the window. "Only that someone tried to kill me." The silence that followed felt loaded. She wasn't asking about facts. She was asking if Penny knew what world she'd stepped into, what he really was. "That's not what I meant." He stared at the empty room behind him. Bare walls, borrowed furniture. "I know." The silence between them felt different now, heavier. She was deciding something, weighing whether to trust him or push harder, whether to let it go. She'd raised him after his father died, taught him how to survive in a world that didn't forgive weakness. If anyone deserved the truth, it was her. His voice dropped until it was almost a murmur. "You practically raised me, Maeve. If there's anyone I should trust, it's you." His grip tightened on the phone. The plastic creaked under the pressure. "But if you're caught in the middle—" The words stuck for half a second. "I don't know what you'll do." Her breath came steady through the line. No shock, no surprise, just acceptance from someone who'd been in this life long enough to know what he was really asking. "Killian?" The name hung between them like smoke in still air. He turned from the window, looked at the empty room with its bare walls. "I don't know." His voice came flat. "But tomorrow, I will." She made her decision faster this time. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much and survived anyway. "Call me at 9 tomorrow." Her voice softened slightly. "And Rowan, be careful." The line went dead. Maeve stood in the back office holding the phone. She set it down slowly and walked to the window where grey afternoon light painted the street below. Her hand flexed at her side. She was his aunt, his father's sister. She'd raised him after his mother died and watched him turn into the same kind of man, hard, careful, alone. And now he was testing Killian, the man who'd been at his side for 15 years. She turned away from the window. Ron Callahan sat at the desk going through inventory sheets. He'd managed the pub's books for 20 years, long enough to know when to ask questions and when to keep his mouth shut. He looked up when she moved and set down his pen without saying anything. "Ron." He waited, patient as always. His reading glasses caught the light. Maeve's posture sharpened though her tone stayed level. The same voice she'd perfected over 30 years running this place. The voice that talked down fights and kept secrets. "Look into the Murray file. The gas explosion." Her fingers drummed once against her elbow. "I want everything. Insurance records, police reports, utility company logs, everything from the night before it happened." Ron pulled off his glasses. He studied her with an expression that said he knew exactly what she was asking and why it mattered, even if she wasn't saying it out loud. "That was a long time ago." She turned back to the window. The light was fading. People kept walking without knowing. Her voice came quieter now, almost sad. "I know." She didn't look at him. "Just find it." Rowan stood in the second house and checked every detail. Lights on, curtains half drawn. The place looked lived in. He sent Arthur the address with instructions to monitor cameras at midnight. Penny stood in front of the mirror. The black lace sat against her skin in a way that made her feel exposed even though she was alone. She turned and caught her reflection. Not the girl who'd scrubbed floors, someone who belonged in expensive things. For the first time in her life, she felt like a woman. She didn't hear the car pull up or the door open downstairs. Rowan moved through the first floor with practiced quiet. He'd learned that noise was a choice, and silence was a weapon. He climbed the stairs with his mind working through that night's variables. Arthur would be in position. The cameras would catch whoever came. The bedroom door stood slightly open. Not wide, just a narrow gap where light cut into the hallway darkness. He meant to walk past without looking. His eyes caught movement through that thin slice of space, and his entire body stopped. Penny stood at the mirror adjusting something at her shoulder, the black lace, against bare skin. His breathing stopped. She turned slightly, and the narrow view showed him the curve of her spine, the way the fabric sat against her body, the line of her neck where her hair had fallen forward. Something tightened in his chest, worse than pain. He couldn't look away. The image burned itself into his mind with permanence that would haunt him later. Her skin pale in the lamplight, the delicate lace, the unself-conscious way she moved when she thought she was alone. Want hit him so hard, his hand flexed against the doorframe before he could stop the reaction. He forced himself to move, tore his gaze from that narrow opening, and made his legs carry him past toward his own room, even though his pulse was doing things it had no business doing. He closed his door and sat on the edge of his bed, dialed Arthur before he could think about anything else. Arthur answered on the first ring. "Boss? Tonight. The address I sent. Bring your best man." Be ready." 3 seconds of silence came through the line before Arthur spoke again, and something in his tone made Rowan's shoulders tighten. Killian knows about the girl. Rowan's entire body went still. If he connects her to Eamon Murray, Rowan's jaw set. If he thinks she knows something about her father's death, if he makes a move on her, the whole thing unravels. When the truth about that explosion comes out, the Doyles are the ones who take the fall. The door across the hall pushed open wider. The faint creak. Penny stood there with her face pale and wide eyes fixed on him. She'd heard his voice through the gap, pushed the door open. Her hearing aid had picked up enough, and now she was reading his lips for the rest. The Doyles, buried secrets, her father. Their eyes met and held. Her expression crumpled, and she turned and ran. Rowan was already moving. "I'll call you back." Penny's feet hit the stairs. Her thoughts crashed together too fast. Eamon Murray, her father, the explosion, the truth, the Doyles take the fall. Rowan knew what happened. He'd been hiding it. The front door stood 20 feet away. She needed out. Behind her, he called her name, but she didn't stop. Cold air hit her face as she stumbled onto the porch, gravel under her feet. She didn't know where she was going. Her father's death. The explosion. Rowan had known everything. Footsteps pounded behind her. "Penelope, stop!" She ran harder. His hand caught her arm and spun her around. She tried to pull free, but his grip tightened, and then both arms were around her, lifting her off the ground. She pushed and kicked, but he was too strong, and her feet left the earth as he turned back. "Let me go!" Her voice broke. "Don't touch me!" He scanned the darkness while he carried her thrashing body inside, looking for threats even now. He kicked the door shut and set her down in the living room. When she tried to run again, he caught her shoulders and pushed her onto the couch, firm enough to make her stay. She swung at him, and her palm connected with his chest. Then again, and again. He caught her wrists, and his voice came out louder than she'd ever heard it. "Sit down and listen to me." Her lower lip trembled, and tears burned in her eyes that she refused to let fall. Fear lived in her expression, and seeing it made something crack open inside his chest. But he kept his face controlled. "What did you hear?" Her breathing came fast and shallow. "What does my father have to do with you?" The words spilled out, desperate. "That explosion, it wasn't a gas leak, was it?" "Your father's death had nothing to do with me, Penelope." He released her wrists but didn't step back. "Calm down." His mind worked through calculations he didn't want to make. "But I can't tell you everything yet. Not right now. Not when the walls are closing in, and tomorrow might be the day everything falls apart." She tried to pull away, and the words came out desperate. "Let me go. I don't trust you anymore. I want to leave." Before she could fight harder, his arms came around her from behind, pinning her arms to her sides. His hands closed over her wrists. His breath touched her ear before he spoke. "You can choose to trust me or not, Penelope." His voice dropped low, and she had to strain through her hearing aid to catch every word. "But I can't let you go anywhere. You're in as much danger as I am, maybe more. I'm going to protect you whether you want me to or not. You're my responsibility now. Do you understand me?" Her breath came faster, and her voice trembled when she spoke. "Why?" The word broke. "I'm nobody to you. Why would you protect me?" Half a second passed before he answered, and the hesitation told her more than his words would. "Because I care about you." He pulled her closer, just slightly. "If something happens to you because of me, because you got caught up in my world, I'll never forgive myself." She stopped struggling, but the words came out small and hurt. "Let me go. You don't need to feel responsible for me. If you had anything to do with my father's death, if that explosion—" Her throat closed around the words. "Just let me go. Please." He breathed in, and the scent of her reached him. This girl in his arms felt dangerous in a way he couldn't name. Something in his stomach twisted when he thought about anyone hurting her. He locked around her more firmly. She stopped moving. She could feel his warm breath against her neck, the solid weight of his body, the way he held her like protection. Her heart started beating faster, but not from fear, from the heat of his body, from warmth spreading through her chest and settling low in her stomach. Her pulse quickened, and he heard it. He noticed. His words came softer this time, close to her ear. "Calm down. I'm going to let you go now, but I need you to promise you won't run. Can you do that?" He released one arm. His fingers moved from her wrist to her hair, threading through it carefully. She felt the rough texture of his hand against the softness, and something inside her chest tightened. She turned her head, and they were inches away. His gaze held worry, concern, something deeper that looked almost like tenderness. She saw it clearly, and the fight drained out of her body all at once. His fingers slid to her cheek, a gentle stroke along her cheekbone. Her lips parted, and she swallowed hard. He forced himself to stop. Things were too complicated. He couldn't let himself want her more when tomorrow might be the day everything fell apart. He turned her to face him. They were both sitting on the couch now, and their knees touched, close enough that he could see every flicker of emotion crossing her face. "I have a plan." He held her gaze, and she saw something she'd never seen before, certainty, the kind that came from years of surviving impossible situations. "I'm going to get us both out of this. You and Nora." Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out anyway. "You need to explain." His thumb found her cheek again, and the gentleness of the touch didn't match the tension in his jaw or the hardness in his expression. "Tomorrow morning, when this is over." He paused, and she watched him measure what to say next. "I want you to stay here tonight. Lock the doors, close the curtains. I'll use my key when I come back." He pulled a paper from his pocket, and the movement brought them even closer on the couch. His fingers pressed it into her hand and lingered there for half a second longer than necessary. "If I don't come back by morning, call this number. Edmund will bring Nora and $5 million. Don't go to her. You could be followed." He stopped, and something shifted in his expression, something darker. "If you hear I'm dead, take Nora and leave. Go far. Never come near the Doyles again." Tears filled her vision, and she couldn't stop them. The thought of him not coming back made her chest hurt in a way she didn't understand. "Please tell me nothing's going to happen to you." He almost smiled, and the expression looked strange on him, like something he'd forgotten how to do. "I always have a plan, Penelope, but I need to know you'll be safe." The question came out barely louder than a breath. "Why?" He framed her face with both hands, thumbs resting against her cheekbones in a touch so careful it made her throat ache. "Because if I die, there might be men coming for you. I need to know you're alive somewhere safe." The words came out shaky and uncertain. "Is this guilt? Pity?" His attention dropped to her mouth and stayed there for 3 full seconds before lifting back. Very slowly he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, almost touching, just the whisper of contact. Then he pulled back and rested his forehead against hers. She went completely still, shocked. He stood from the couch. She scrambled to her feet and caught his arm before he could take another step. He turned back in surprise. The words came out trembling, and she didn't try to hide it anymore. "You're hiding things." They tumbled out faster now, like if she didn't say them all at once, she'd lose her nerve completely. "I shouldn't trust you, but with you I feel safer than I've ever felt." Color climbed her neck. "You look at me like no one ever has. I don't want you to leave. I don't want something to happen to you." She stepped closer, wrapped her arms around him, pressed her face against his chest. He held her like she was something that might break if he wasn't careful enough. He lowered his face to her hair and breathed her in, and the scent of her made something in his chest tighten almost painfully. Then he kissed her forehead with a gentleness that didn't match anything else about him. She lifted her face. She rose onto her toes and kissed him before either of them could think better of it. He went still for half a second. Then something broke loose, and he kissed her back with everything he'd been holding in. He tightened his grip, and his mouth moved against hers with hunger he couldn't hide. They broke apart, both of them breathing hard. Neither moved for a long moment, just stood there, staring at each other like they'd both crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The words came out rougher than he meant them to. "I can barely stand to touch you. You deserve better." She took his hand and placed it over her heart where he could feel it racing beneath his palm. I want you to touch me." He shook his head slowly, just twice, side to side. "You'll regret this." She met his gaze without wavering, and he saw no doubt in her. None at all. "I don't care. What if I never see you again?" She pulled her sweater up and over her head in one slow, deliberate movement. She stayed locked on him the entire time, and he watched color flush across her skin as the fabric cleared her head and fell forgotten to the floor. The black lace sat against her pale skin like something she'd chosen just for this moment. Just for him. She stood before him with all her beauty and fear and want written so clearly across her face that it made his chest ache. He couldn't look away. "You don't have to do this." His voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. "You don't owe me anything." She kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation in it. "Before I die of embarrassment," her voice trembled, "please take me." He lifted her before she could change her mind, and his eyes never left hers as he carried her toward the bedroom, holding her against his chest like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. She rested her head against his chest and felt his heartbeat steady and strong. Minutes ago she'd been trying to run, and now every part of her wanted to get closer, wanted things she'd never wanted before. Whatever he was hiding, she'd chosen to believe he was protecting her, and right now she was releasing a hunger she'd never let herself taste. She wanted to be his completely. Whatever came after. He laid her on the bed with a gentleness that made her throat ache, and his fingers moved like she might break if he wasn't careful enough. His kisses were soft and deliberate, and the want inside him wasn't wild but full of need so deep it made her breathing change. His jaw flexed once before he spoke. "Are you sure?" She nodded, because words felt impossible. His fingers found the hearing aid at her ear and paused, asking permission, and she nodded again. He removed it carefully and leaned close enough that his breath warmed her neck. "Just feel my touch." The world went silent, and every other sense sharpened until she could feel everything, the weight of him, the warmth of his hands, the way his breath moved across her neck. Without sound, everything became more intense, and touch turned electric. Her mind knew nothing, but her instincts understood, and she pulled him to her and breathed in his scent. When his mouth traced down her throat, she arched into him, and her body knew exactly what it wanted. He kissed her everywhere, slowly and thoroughly, like he had all the time in the world. She felt herself unraveling, felt control slipping away, felt something building inside her. Her fingers twisted in his hair and pulled him closer, and when his mouth found hers hungrily, she kissed him back with everything she had. She sensed danger in this, but stayed anyway because the pull was stronger than fear. His hands moved across her skin, and she could feel him holding himself back. Her moans came freely unguarded, and she'd never felt safer and more vulnerable at once. He worked his way back up and braced himself above her, and his eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, looking for any reason to stop, and finding none. His hand cupped her face and turned it toward him. "Look at me when you become mine, Penelope." She watched his lips form the words and nodded, and then the last distance closed, and her eyes went wide. She dug her fingers into his shoulders, and the sound from her throat was pleasure and pain, and he caught it with his mouth, kissing her deeply, while his body remained still, giving her time. His restraint cost him everything, but he held motionless until her grip eased and she whispered his name. Then he moved. She stopped thinking. The world narrowed to just this, just him. Just the feeling of connection so complete, it rewrote something inside her. She'd never felt more seen. He kissed her hungrily, and his mouth moved to her ear, and his voice came out rough. "I'll never let you go. You're mine for life now. Mine." She nodded and pulled him closer, and let herself fall completely. When they broke apart, the intensity left her trembling, and he held her through it steady with his forehead pressed against hers. He gathered her against his chest, and she curled into him, and his fingers traced slow patterns along her spine, gentle and possessive. She'd given him something she could never get back, and somehow that didn't scare her. Whatever came next, she knew she'd face it because being his felt more real than anything else ever had. Rowan stood in the bedroom doorway watching Penelope sleep, and something in his chest pulled tight enough to hurt. 3 days ago he hadn't known this woman existed, and now she was the only thing that mattered. Her dark hair spilled across his pillow, and her breathing came slow and peaceful. Safe. His. He needed to leave before she woke, because if she opened those eyes, he wouldn't be able to walk away, and there was a reckoning waiting tonight. He looked back one more time, memorizing the curve of her shoulder, the way her hand curled against the pillow. Then he forced himself to leave. The door clicked shut, and Penelope's eyes opened. She lay still, feeling the sweet exhaustion in her body and the warmth that came from being thoroughly known. Rowan's scent clung to her skin, and she breathed it in and felt something dangerous shift in her chest. She heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard the front door open and close, the engine starting in the driveway. Her instincts recognized something unnamed, and she threw the covers back and scrambled for her clothes. Something was wrong, and she wasn't going to sit here while Rowan walked into danger. She dressed fast and quiet and ran to the window in time to see his taillights disappearing down the street. Rowan sat in the darkness 2 houses down with his gun loaded and ready in his lap. The trap house sat dark and empty, waiting. A few minutes later, headlights appeared, and Arthur's car pulled up to the curb. Arthur and one of his men climbed out and scanned the street, checking angles before walking to the front door. Arthur bent down and retrieved the key from under the mat, and they disappeared inside. Lights came on in the windows, bright enough to be seen from the street. Bait. His pulse shifted in warning when more headlights appeared less than a minute behind Arthur, moving slow and deliberate. They'd been following him. The car stopped 3 houses away, and 2 men climbed out. Professional. Armed. He dialed Arthur. "They're here. 2 shooters. Be ready." Rowan stepped out and moved through the shadows. The first gunshot cracked through the night, and he was already running. Penelope sat in the cab watching Rowan's car, and her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd flagged it the moment his taillights disappeared, and now she was following him, and she couldn't explain why, except that leaving him felt impossible. Rowan stopped in a dark neighborhood, and she paid the driver and climbed out. She moved into the shadows behind a line of trees and watched him sitting in his car, watching a house with lights in the windows. She stayed hidden, trying to understand what was happening, why he was here. He pulled a gun from his jacket, and her breathing forgot its rhythm. Then gunshots cracked through the night, 3, 4, 5, coming from inside the house, and Rowan was running toward it and disappearing through the door, and Penelope's chest locked up because he was in there now where the shooting was. And what if he was hurt? What if something happened to him? What if... Right then a car appeared down the street, parking a short distance from the house. 3 men climbed out, and she saw the third one clearly in the streetlight, and recognition slammed into her. White hair, sharp features. The man from the hotel, the one who'd asked for her last name. Killian. Penelope froze for half a second, her mind racing in a dozen directions at once. Those men were walking toward the house where Rowan was, where the gunshots had come from, and she didn't know what to do, didn't know if she should run or hide or... No, she had to think fast. She had to get there before them, had to warn Rowan. She ran. Rowan burst through the door with his gun raised and took in the scene in half a second. One shooter was down, sprawled on his back, with blood pooling beneath him. Arthur's man was slumped against the wall, holding his shoulder where blood seeped between his fingers. Arthur and the second shooter were locked together on the floor, grappling for control of a weapon, and losing. Rowan didn't hesitate. He fired once, and the shooter's leg gave out beneath him with a scream that died into a choked gasp. Arthur shoved him off and rolled clear, breathing hard, and Rowan moved forward and stood over the wounded man with his gun pointed at his head. "Your partner's dead." His voice came out flat and cold. "Now you tell me who sent you. Whose man are you? Who wants me dead?" The shooter's face twisted in pain, but his mouth stayed shut, and Rowan lowered the gun to press it hard against the bleeding leg and watched the man's eyes go wide. "Last chance!" The door burst open. Penelope stood in the doorway, gasping for air, with her hair wild around her face and her eyes wide with fear and adrenaline, and Rowan's entire world stopped. She was supposed to be safe. She was supposed to be in his bed, where nothing could touch her. And instead, she was here, standing in a room full of blood and bodies with gunmen outside, and... His eyes went wide for half a second before fury slammed into place, because fury was easier than the terror clawing at his chest. "What the hell are you doing here?" The roar tore out of him loud enough to shake the walls. "I told you to stay at the house!" She flinched, but held her ground. Her chest heaved from running. No time to explain, no time for his anger. "They're coming!" The words rushed out breathless and urgent. "Killian and 2 others, right now!" Rowan and Arthur locked eyes across the room, and everything that needed to be said passed in that single look. Rowan grabbed her arm and pulled her into the storage closet, and Arthur knocked the shooter unconscious before killing the lights. The closet was barely wide enough for one person, and Rowan pulled Penelope against his chest and held her there with one arm, while his other hand gripped his gun. They were pressed so close together she could feel his heartbeat through his shirt and smell the leather and gunpowder on his skin and see the fury still burning in his eyes even in the darkness. He shook his head slowly, and she knew what he was thinking. "Why did you do this? Why did you risk everything?" She leaned close enough that her lips almost touched his ear and whispered so quietly the words were barely sound. "I wanted to help you." His hand came up in a sharp gesture. Silence. Through the crack in the closet door they could see 3 figures moving through the entrance, and Killian's voice cut through the darkness, calm and controlled, like he was discussing the weather instead of standing in a room full of blood. "Anyone still breathing?" "These 2. Killian pulled his gun and fired twice without hesitation, and Penelope's throat opened on a scream that Rowan caught with his palm pressed tight against her mouth, holding her shaking against him while her eyes went wide with horror. "Rowan! Arthur!" Killian's voice carried the weight of someone who knew exactly where his prey was hiding. "I know you're here. Let's talk man to man. You're my nephew, Rowan. You know I won't hurt you, but you've been making moves that threaten the family. Let's discuss this rationally. I'm protecting what's ours." He paused and turned toward one of his men and leaned close, and Rowan couldn't hear what he was saying. But he could see his lips moving, and he felt Penelope go rigid in his arms. Her gaze locked onto Killian's mouth through the crack in the door, and he watched her eyes track every movement, and then she looked up at Rowan, and the fear in her expression made his blood run cold. She pressed her lips to his ear. "He said kill them all the moment you find them." Rowan's jaw hardened and his chin lifted, and his arm tightened around Penelope until she could barely breathe. No more running, no more negotiating, no more pretending the man who'd raised him wasn't the same man who'd murdered her father and wanted them both dead. Tonight one of them walked out of this house. Only one. Arthur fired. The gunshot cracked through the silence, and 2 of Killian's men moved fast toward the sound. Killian stood in the center of the room with his weapon raised, scanning the shadows. Rowan turned to Penelope, and his fingers found her wrist tight enough to leave marks. "Don't leave this closet, no matter what you hear." Her breath paused carefully, but she nodded. He slipped out, and the door clicked shut behind him. The house had gone dark, and Rowan moved through it like he'd been born in shadow. Killian wasn't where he'd been standing. The center of the room sat empty. He found Arthur's man first slumped behind an overturned table, with blood seeping through his shirt at the shoulder. The dead shooter lay a few feet away. Rowan scanned for the second man and spotted movement near the hallway. He fired once. The bullet grazed the man's shoulder and spun him sideways with a sharp curse. The man raised his weapon, but Rowan was already moving and tackled him hard into the wall. They went down together, and Rowan ended it with a single blow that left the man unconscious. "Just the 2 of us left now, nephew." Killian's voice came from the doorway, calm and steady, like they were discussing dinner plans instead of standing in a room full of bodies. He stood near the closet with his gun held loose at his side, waiting. Rowan straightened and turned, and they faced each other across the space. "Why?" Killian's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile once. Leading this family was my right. I earned it long before you were born." Rowan's chest tightened in recognition. "You supported me. You stood beside me when I took over. I thought you'd get your hands dirty and burn out fast." Killian's fingers curled and stilled around the grip of his weapon. "But you surprised me. You brought everyone together, earned their respect, and then you started changing how we do business." His gaze hardened a fraction. "This honesty disease you've caught, what the hell is that about?" "I kept us safe." Rowan swallowed restraint visibly. "I wanted the money we made to be clean." Killian laughed, and the sound carried no warmth. "That's not how this works, son." His expression went cold and calculating. "Where's the girl?" Rowan's jaw set. His grip tightened on his weapon. "She doesn't know anything." He held his ground deliberately. "She didn't even know who I was." "Then she's unlucky." Killian's control radiated without force. "Because I don't leave evidence behind, and I don't leave loose ends." Rowan laughed without humor. "Eamon Murray was just an accountant. Why did you kill him?" Something flickered behind Killian's eyes. "He was about to tell your father about the side business I was running, about the money disappearing into accounts Sean didn't know existed." He lowered his voice. He stuck his nose where it didn't belong. "He had kids at home that night. That's the difference between you and me." Killian stepped closer. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect myself and this family. You're soft, emotional. You can't run this organization." He raised his weapon slightly. "Now tell me where she—" A faint sound came from inside the closet. Killian's head turned, and something dangerous crossed his face. A smile. Inside the closet, Penelope stared at the shovel leaning against the back wall, and her composure thinned. She pressed her lips together to steady herself and reached for it. Her fingers closed around the handle. The wood creaked. Through the crack, she saw Killian's attention snap toward the door, and her breathing forgot its rhythm entirely. Rowan's hand moved toward his trigger. "Don't!" Killian's gun swung toward Rowan, while his other hand reached for the closet door. "Let's see what we have here." The door opened. Penelope swung the shovel with everything she had, and metal connected with Killian's wrist, hard enough to send his weapon clattering across the floor. But he was faster than she expected. His arm wrapped around her throat and yanked her against him, and she couldn't breathe, couldn't move, and her vision started to narrow at the edges. Rowan took a step forward, his weapon trained on Killian's skull. "Let her go." Killian's grip tightened. His voice stayed calm against her ear. "I can snap her neck with one move." He pulled her closer. "You know I can." Rowan's finger moved to the trigger. His voice dropped to ice. "And I'll put a bullet through your skull." Killian laughed. "Yeah, after she's dead." For half a second, nobody moved. Rowan's gaze locked onto Penelope, and she saw something in his eyes that looked like fear. She was gasping for air, trying to stay upright, trying to show him she wasn't broken. Then a woman's voice cut through the tension. "Let the girl go, Killian." Everyone turned. Maeve stood in the doorway with a gun pointed steady at the back of Killian's head. Her face looked older than Penelope had ever seen it. "Nobody from my family dies tonight. And you let that innocent girl go right now." Killian went rigid. "Maeve, don't get involved in this." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. His head snapped toward the sound. Recognition hit. Then his gaze whipped back to her. "What did you do?" Her expression didn't change, steady as stone. "I gave the police the file hours ago. They've been waiting for my signal." She paused. "The explosion report. The one we've been hiding for 15 years. The color drained from his face. "You betrayed me." Her throat moved, but her hand stayed steady on the weapon. "You betrayed me when you decided to kill Rowan." She swallowed what looked like pain. "You know I love that boy like my own son. You didn't leave me a choice." The sirens screamed closer. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows, and car doors slammed outside. Heavy boots hit the porch. "Boston PD, drop your weapons!" Killian's arm loosened, and Penelope tore free and stumbled forward. Rowan caught her and pulled her behind him in one motion while keeping his gun trained on Killian. Officers flooded through the door. They took Killian first, slamming him face down and cuffing his wrists, while he stared at Maeve with something that might have been betrayal or rage or both. He didn't fight, just stared at her with that look. "You'll regret this," he said. Maeve lowered her weapon slowly. Something broke in her expression. "I already do." Her voice came quieter. "But I'll live with it." They dragged him out. Penelope ran to Rowan, and his arms came around her and held tight. She buried her face against his chest and felt his heartbeat pounding and his breath coming fast. The night was over, but she didn't know yet that the hardest part was still coming. The ambulances sat with their lights spinning. Rowan leaned against one while a paramedic cleaned his shoulder. Arthur sat inside getting his wound wrapped. They talked in low voices about next steps and damage control. Penelope stood watching with Maeve beside her. Her pulse steadied, but something in her chest wouldn't settle. Every few seconds, Rowan's eyes found hers and held before the doctor pulled his attention back. She felt unexpectedly seen. Maeve moved closer and her voice came out gentle. "You must have been terrified tonight." Penelope smiled faintly and nodded. "I was. But with Rowan, I always felt safe." Maeve's expression softened momentarily before going carefully neutral. "That's the problem, Penelope. You can't be safe with him anymore." Penelope blinked and turned to look at her properly. "There's a car coming for you." Maeve nodded toward the end of the street. "Nora's already inside waiting. You're leaving Boston tonight. Money in an account. Enough to start over." She paused. "You don't come back. You don't contact Rowan." The words didn't land at first. Why? Because this is who we are. We hurt each other even when we love. We have fortunes to protect. Connections. Her gaze held steady. Feelings can't come before responsibility. Penelope shook her head. "I love him." "I know." Maeve's smile carried no warmth. "We don't love in this family. We make arrangements." She glanced toward Rowan. "And if he's going to lead, his emotions can't get in the way." Headlights appeared down the street, moving toward them. "Now you're going to walk to that car." Maeve's voice went quieter. "And you're going to disappear. For good." Penelope's throat moved around unspoken words, and her eyes burned. She looked at Rowan. He smiled at something the paramedic said, and turned back to Arthur like nothing in the world was wrong. Maeve caught her hand and squeezed hard enough to hurt. "If you don't, I'll find out where you are, and it won't be good for Nora." Her eyes searched Penelope's face. "You love your sister, don't you?" Penelope nodded because she couldn't speak. "Good." Maeve released her hand. "I love Rowan the same way. Don't worry. You'll have a comfortable life. Now go. Don't make your sister wait any longer." The car pulled up and stopped. Through the window, Penelope could see Nora in the back seat looking worried and relieved all at once. Penelope walked forward, and each step felt like breaking. Her breathing normalized slowly, but her heart stayed fractured. She reached the car, and Nora opened the door, looking worried and relieved. "I'm here. I'm okay." She turned back one last time. Rowan was talking to Arthur, his hands moving, the man she'd given herself to, the man she was leaving without a word. She climbed in, and tears slid down her face as the door closed and the engine started and Boston disappeared behind them. The ambulances sat with their lights spinning. Rowan leaned against one while a paramedic cleaned his shoulder. Arthur sat inside getting his wound wrapped. They talked in low voices about next steps and damage control. Penelope stood watching with Maeve beside her. Her pulse steadied, but something in her chest wouldn't settle. Every few seconds, Rowan's eyes found hers and held before the doctor pulled his attention back. She felt unexpectedly seen. Maeve moved closer, and her voice came out gentle. "You must have been terrified tonight." Penelope smiled faintly and nodded. "I was. But with Rowan, I always felt safe." Maeve's expression softened momentarily before going carefully neutral. "That's the problem, Penelope. You can't be safe with him anymore." Penelope blinked and turned to look at her properly. "There's a car coming for you." Maeve nodded toward the end of the street. Nora's already inside waiting. You're leaving Boston tonight. Money in an account. Enough to start over. She paused. You don't come back. You don't contact Rowan. The words didn't land at first. Why? Because this is who we are. We hurt each other even when we love. We have fortunes to protect. Connections. Her gaze held steady. Feelings can't come before responsibility? Penelope shook her head. I love him. I know. Maeve's smile carried no warmth. We don't love in this family. We make arrangements. She glanced toward Rowan. And if he's going to lead, his emotions can't get in the way. Headlights appeared down the street, moving toward them. Now you're going to walk to that car. Maeve's voice went quieter. And you're going to disappear for good. Penelope's throat moved around unspoken words, and her eyes burned. She looked at Rowan. He smiled at something the paramedic said and turned back to Arthur like nothing in the world was wrong. Maeve caught her hand and squeezed hard enough to hurt. If you don't, I'll find out where you are. And it won't be good for Nora. Her eyes searched Penelope's face. You love your sister, don't you? Penelope nodded because she couldn't speak. Good. Maeve released her hand. I love Rowan the same way. Don't worry. You'll have a comfortable life. Now go. Don't make your sister wait any longer. The car pulled up and stopped. Through the window, Penelope could see Nora in the back seat, looking worried and relieved all at once. Penelope walked forward, and each step felt like breaking. Her breathing normalized slowly, but her heart stayed fractured. She reached the car, and Nora opened the door. I'm here. I'm okay. She turned back one last time. Rowan was talking to Arthur, his hands moving. The man she'd given herself to. The man she was leaving without a word. She climbed in, and tears slid down her face as the door closed and the engine started and Portsmouth disappeared behind them. Rowan walked toward Maeve, scanning for dark hair and hazel eyes that weren't there. Where's Penelope? Maeve's head dropped, and when she looked up, her face carried worry. She was scared, Rowan. Everything tonight. She needed her sister. She wanted to go. He registered her absence instantly, and the street felt too empty. His eyes narrowed, looking past Maeve where the taillights were already gone. She wouldn't leave without telling me. Maeve's hand found his shoulder and squeezed. She asked me to tell you she can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Rowan shook his head slowly. No, that's not her. She's young. Maeve's voice went softer. 3 days ago, her life was normal. Then her father's murder, Killian, bombs, police, us covering it up. Her inhale slowed deliberately. Maybe she just couldn't take any more of it. His jaw tightened, and he turned away because the alternative was breaking something. The ache in his stomach spread into his chest where her scent still clung to his shirt. Her effect stayed even after she left. Maybe Maeve was right. Maybe Penelope ran towards something cleaner, something that matched the innocence she still carried. His mind replayed small moments, the way she'd looked at him, the way she'd said his name, the way her body had fit against his. His silence required effort. Maybe letting her go was right. His life was bullets and blood. She deserved better. He stared at the empty street where her taillights had disappeared. 3 days. That's all it had taken to break him open. The silence she left behind felt louder than any gunshot he'd ever heard. And for the first time in 8 years, Rowan Doyle didn't know if he could survive what he'd lost. Thank you so much for listening to Penelope and Rowan's story. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me bring you more stories like this. But this isn't over. What if Penelope doesn't stay gone? What if she comes back stronger, braver, and ready to fight for what she wants? And what if Rowan is about to face the biggest surprise of his life? If you want part 2, where Penelope returns and everything changes, drop part 2 in the comments below. Let me know if you're ready to see how this story really ends.